You cannot do this!
You have got to be kidding me, David muttered. The words barely audible over the thrum of the mini excavator Elena was expertly maneuvering. A patrol car, lights silently strobing, was pulling up their long, gravel driveway. Before it even stopped, a woman with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob and a pinched expression was practically leaping out of the passenger seat, pointing a manicured finger directly at Elena. There, that's her. She's destroying the property. I told you, officer, she's an absolute menace. This was Karen from down the road, and this wasn't her first performance. Just last month, she'd complained about Elena's excessive native plant choices, claiming they were uncultivated and a fire hazard. Despite Elena showing her the official fire-safe landscaping guidelines from the county. Now, with Elena merely digging a trench for an irrigation line for the new fruit orchard, a line that would eventually feed hundreds of drought-resistant trees and shrubs, Karen had escalated to involving law enforcement. It was infuriating. The sheer audacity, the immediate assumption of wrongdoing, the blatant disrespect for two people simply working on their own land. What Karen, and evidently the police officer strolling towards them, failed to grasp was that the woman in the mud-splattered work boots, currently being accused of destroying property, was Elena Petrova, whose signature designs for sprawling, environmentally sustainable public spaces graced city parks across the state, bringing millions of dollars in tourism and environmental grants to urban centers. This entire absurd confrontation, from the moment Karen's frantic call interrupted their peaceful morning to the inevitable, frustrating exchange with Officer Miller, felt like a perverse microcosm of every petty power play and prejudiced judgment they'd encountered since moving to this quiet, seemingly idyllic ranch community. They thought they were building a sanctuary, a wild, thriving oasis, but instead, they were constantly fending off a neighbor who seemed determined to see them as anything but. Elena, however, had a quiet resolve, a professional architect's precision in her movements, and David knew this wasn't just about digging a trench anymore. It was about dignity, about asserting their right to exist and create on their own land. And they were preparing a strategic countermove that would lay bare Karen's deeper, hidden biases, ultimately leading to a very public, very satisfying reckoning that would challenge everyone's assumptions about who belonged where and why. The true turning point, David suspected, lay buried not in their ranch soil, but in Karen's own past, a past that would soon come to light. Karen's voice, shrill and indignant, sliced through the morning air like a broken pane of glass. Officer, do you see this? It's an absolute disgrace. She's tearing up the entire landscape. Our property values are plummeting because of this. This mess. Officer Miller, a burly man whose uniform seemed to strain at the seams, nodded slowly, his gaze sweeping over Elena's work. The mini excavator, normally an impressive piece of machinery, suddenly looked like a destructive toy under Karen's theatrical denunciations. Elena, wearing faded jeans and a broad-brimmed hat, simply turned off the engine, pulled off her safety goggles, and wiped a streak of dirt from her forehead. Her expression was unreadable, a blend of weariness and an almost imperceptible hint of amusement, like a master craftsman observing a child's tantrum over a work of art. David stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture that felt, even to him, utterly inadequate. Officer, good morning. There's no destruction happening here. My wife Elena is installing an irrigation system for a new orchard. We're planting native fruit trees, part of our long-term plan for the ranch. Karen scoffed, her arms now crossed tightly over her chest. Native fruit trees. Please, it looks like a construction site, and she's not even licensed for this kind of heavy machinery. It's a liability. What if someone gets hurt? What if that trench collapses? Her eyes darted to David, then back to Elena, a smug superiority in her gaze. And I highly doubt she knows anything about proper landscaping. This isn't some city lot she's fiddling with. The subtle insult wasn't lost on David. It was the constant refrain. You don't belong here. You don't understand our way of life. Elena had chosen this ranch specifically for its open spaces, its potential for ecological restoration, a stark contrast to the meticulously planned concrete and steel of her urban projects. The irony was almost unbearable. Elena, who had redesigned the sprawling, historic Magnolia Park downtown, incorporating advanced water retention systems and biodiverse native plantings, was being lectured on proper landscaping by Karen, whose own manicured lawn looked like it belonged on a golf course, not a drought-prone ranch. This particular brand of rural gatekeeping, David knew, was rooted in something deeper than just aesthetics. Officer Miller finally spoke, his voice gruff but not overtly hostile. Ma'am, is this your property? He asked Elena, gesturing broadly at the acres surrounding them. Yes, officer. My husband and I purchased it 2 years ago. We have the deeds inside, Elena replied calmly, her voice even, almost detached. David admired her composure. He felt his own blood pressure rising. And what exactly are you doing with this equipment? Miller's eyes narrowed slightly, sweeping from the excavator to the long, freshly dug trench. As my husband said, I'm installing an irrigation system. It's a standard agricultural practice. We're building an orchard. The permit for the water well was approved last month, and this trench is for the main line from the well to the future orchard site. Elena explained, her tone factual, devoid of emotion. She was speaking to him like she would a junior engineer on a city project, laying out the facts, expecting professional understanding. The officer, however, looked more bewildered than enlightened. An orchard, huh? Looks like you're digging up the whole place. Karen chimed in again, seemingly emboldened by the officer's lack of immediate action. And she's got no business operating heavy machinery. It's a hazard. David stepped in again. Officer, my wife has a valid operator's license for this equipment, and she's a professional landscape architect, specializing in large-scale ecological design. She literally designs city parks. The last part was thrown out, a desperate attempt to inject some context, some professional weight into the absurdity. But it seemed to bounce off Officer Miller's hardened exterior. He merely grunted. Ma'am, do you have any official paperwork for this project, like a permit to dig such a large trench? Miller asked Elena, ignoring David's interjection completely. The implication was clear. They were amateurs, probably breaking some obscure rural code. The complete disregard for Elena's expertise, the instant dismissal of their legitimacy, stung David deeply. It wasn't just Karen's bias, it was the systemic assumption that if you didn't look like them, you couldn't possibly be doing anything legitimate. This was only the beginning of what David knew would be an escalating campaign from Karen. Her previous complaints, always escalating, always thinly veiled accusations of impropriety, had prepared them for this. But the involvement of the police, turning their private work into a public spectacle, felt like a new low. They would not, however, let this stand. Elena, with her quiet strength and strategic mind, was already formulating a plan. This was no longer just about their ranch. It was about exposing the rot of prejudice and small-mindedness. The true turning point, David suspected, lay buried not in their ranch soil, but in Karen's own past, a past that would soon come to light, revealing the ugly truth behind her relentless harassment. The resolution wouldn't be in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion, a place Elena knew how to navigate with lethal precision. Officer Miller's pad was out, pen poised. So, ma'am, paperwork. His tone was more insistent now, less open to explanation. Elena sighed, a soft expulsion of air that was more resignation than frustration. Officer, for private land, installing a private irrigation system for agricultural purposes doesn't typically require a specific trenching permit beyond the well permit, which we have. We're adhering to all setback requirements and safety protocols. Karen, however, was not to be outdone. She's being evasive. I've seen them out here for weeks, tearing up the land. And what about the noise? That machine is a constant disturbance. My dog, Muffin, gets so agitated. Her voice ratcheted up another notch, painting a picture of deliberate torment. David felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The noise was the occasional hum of a small excavator, run during business hours. Muffin, a pampered poodle, spent most of his days yapping at squirrels. The sheer fabrication was astounding. Karen, that's an exaggeration. Elena only runs the machine for a few hours a day, and it's well within noise ordinances. We're working on our own land. Your own land is impacting my peace and quiet. And what about the runoff? All that exposed dirt will erode and flood my property during the next rain. Karen's dramatic pronouncements were clearly designed to inflame, to paint them as irresponsible, uncaring neighbors. It was a familiar pattern. Every improvement they made, every step towards their vision of a sustainable ranch, was met with escalating hostility. From the moment they'd bought the dilapidated property 2 years ago, a place that Karen had, ironically, tried to purchase herself. Before being outbid, she had waged a subtle, then increasingly overt, campaign of nuisance complaints. First, it was the unnatural native wildflowers Elena planted to attract pollinators. Then, the eyesore of the new composting bins. Now, it was the essential groundwork for their orchard. It wasn't about the noise, or the runoff, or the dirt. It was about control, about a perceived invasion of her pristine, predictable, rural enclave. Officer Miller seemed to be wavering, caught between Karen's theatrics and Elena's quiet logic. He glanced at the trench, then at the small pile of excavated earth. Well, it does look substantial. Are you sure you don't need any other permits? Officer, what permits specifically are you referring to? Elena asked, her voice, still level, but with an underlying sharpness David recognized. It was the tone she used when probing a consultant who hadn't done their homework. We've gone through the County Planning and Zoning Office, the Water Board, and the Agricultural Extension Office. We have all necessary approvals for our operations here. This is simply a phase of the approved Agricultural Development Plan. Miller shuffled his feet, clearly out of his depth regarding land use regulations. Karen, seeing his hesitation, jumped back in. See, she's trying to confuse you. They're just digging a giant hole. What if a child wanders onto their property and falls in? It's irresponsible, and the dust it's covering my prize-winning roses. David wanted to shout, to point out the absurdity of her claims, the flimsy pretexts for her genuine malice. But Elena simply gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. She knew, better than anyone, how quickly emotional outbursts could be twisted and used against them. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an interrogation under false pretenses. Miller finally made a decision. All right, look, I'm going to have to issue a warning for public safety regarding the open trench. You need to secure this, and I'll need to see proof of those permits you mentioned at the station by end of day. If not, we might have to issue a cease and desist order until you get everything in order. He tore a sheet from his pad, scribbling furiously. It wasn't an arrest, but it was a clear sign of the system siding with the loud, persistent complainant, regardless of facts. David watched, seething, as Miller handed the slip to Elena. The injustice of it was palpable. A bitter taste in his mouth. The official warning notice felt like a flimsy piece of paper designed to assert authority, where none was truly warranted. Elena held it between her fingers, reading the boilerplate text with the same critical eye she might apply to a flawed blueprint. Officer Miller, having delivered his dictum, seemed eager to escape the tense standoff. Karen, on the other hand, preened, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. See, I told you, she crowed, gesturing wildly. They're breaking the law. You can't just do whatever you want out here. David stepped in front of Elena, shielding her from Karen's vitriol. Officer, this is ridiculous. We are not breaking any laws. We're developing our land according to county regulations. This woman has been harassing us since we moved in. She's making false accusations. Miller sighed, his patience clearly wearing thin. Sir, I'm just responding to a complaint. There's an open trench. It's a safety concern. You need to secure it, and you need to show proof of any permits required for this type of work. That's standard procedure. He wasn't hostile, just impassive. A cog in the machine, following protocol based on a skewed narrative. The worst part was, David knew, this wasn't maliciousness from the officer, but rather a lack of critical thinking, a reliance on the loudest voice, and perhaps an underlying assumption that the new residents, the ones who didn't fit the established mold, were probably the ones causing trouble. David flashed back to the day they'd found the ranch. It was a sprawling, neglected property, overgrown but bursting with potential. Elena had seen it immediately, not just a house, but an ecosystem waiting to be revived. Imagine, David, she'd said, her eyes alight with vision, a place where we can truly live in harmony with the land. No more concrete jungles, just the vastness of the sky and the hum of nature. It was a dream they both shared, a counterpoint to Elena's high-stakes urban projects. They'd poured their life savings, their energy, their hopes into this place. And from the moment the for sale sign went up, Karen, whose sprawling, meticulously manicured estate bordered theirs, had made her disapproval known. She'd made veiled comments about city folk not understanding rural ways, about preserving the character of the neighborhood, which always seemed to translate to preserving her idea of the neighborhood, without them. Now, Officer Miller was effectively validating Karen's narrative. We'll be back to check on this by the end of the week. Mr. Miller, make sure that trench is covered or fenced off, and have those permits ready. He turned, gave Karen a brief, perfunctory nod, and retreated to his patrol car, leaving them standing in the dusty drive, the smell of fresh earth mixing with the lingering scent of injustice. Unbelievable. David fumed, watching the patrol car disappear down the road. He didn't even listen. She just spouted nonsense, and he takes her word for it. Elena walked over to the mini excavator, her hand resting lightly on its muddy surface. He was just doing his job, David. He saw an open trench and a concerned citizen. The problem isn't him, not entirely. It's the perception Karen has carefully manufactured, and the fact that our appearance, our different approach to ranching, doesn't fit their preconceived notions. She looked at him, her eyes calm but resolute. We can't just let this go, not this time. So, what do we do? Fill the trench back in. Stop the orchard, David asked, feeling a wave of despondency. Elena shook her head slowly, a faint smile playing on her lips. No, we finish the trench, we secure it, of course, and then, we expose her, not just to the police, but to the whole community. This isn't just about the ranch anymore. It's about more than that. The steel in her voice was unmistakable. This was Elena, the woman who took on multi-million-dollar city contracts, navigating complex bureaucracies and public scrutiny with grace and formidable intellect. Karen had just picked a fight with the wrong landscape architect. That evening, the ranch house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a war room. Papers were spread across the dining table, county zoning maps, water rights documents, agricultural development guidelines, and even Elena's landscape architectural certifications. David was still fuming, but Elena was in her element. Methodically building their case, the warning notice focuses on public safety and permits. Elena began, tracing a line on a county map with her finger. The public safety issue is easily addressed. We'll put up temporary fencing, clear signage that satisfies their immediate concern. And the permits? David asked, still picturing Officer Miller's dismissive expression. We have all the necessary approvals for our water well, which is tied to agricultural use. The trench itself is just part of the overall site development, which doesn't require a separate trenching permit for private land, Elena explained. The key is how they interpret agricultural development. Karen is pushing a narrative that our work is destructive and unpermitted, because it doesn't fit her narrow view of what a ranch should look like. Her idea of a pristine, manicured estate, not a working, ecologically restored farm. So, we show them the paperwork, and it's over. David was skeptical. He'd seen enough of Karen's tactics to know it wouldn't be that simple. Elena looked up, her gaze meeting his, a spark of something fierce in her eyes. No, David, it's not just about the paperwork. It's about discrediting Karen's entire argument. Her concern is a facade. This isn't the first time she's tried to obstruct us. Remember when she tried to block our application for the agricultural tax exemption, claiming our wild plantings weren't productive? David nodded. Or when she spread rumors that our livestock were attracting coyotes, even though we don't even have livestock yet. Exactly, Elena said, leaning back in her chair. This is a pattern of harassment, based on some underlying animosity. We need to find out why. Why is she so fixated on us? Why is she so determined to make our lives difficult? You think it's more than just general dislike? David asked, a new thought dawning. I do. People don't go to this much trouble without a deeper motivation. There's something personal here. Something she's not revealing. Elena mused, tapping her pen against her lips. My guess is, it connects to my work. Or our background, she continued. Here's the plan. First, we secure the trench perfectly. Overkill, even. No more public safety excuses. Second, we gather every single permit, every county approval, every official document related to our ranch development. We'll present them in person to the county planning office and formally request a review of Officer Miller's warning, citing Karen's history of vexatious complaints. And what about Karen? David asked. How do we expose her? Elena smiled, a slow, predatory smile that rarely appeared but promised trouble for anyone on the receiving end. That's where you come in, my love. You're good at digging. Find out everything you can about Karen Finch. Her professional life, her community involvement, any public records, especially anything related to local development projects, environmental initiatives, or anything that might intersect with my kind of work. I have a feeling there's a connection, something personal, that's driving her vendetta. She sees me, or, rather, what she thinks I am, a city person, encroaching on her rural sanctuary. But there's a specific trigger, I'm sure of it. And we're going to find it, and then we're going to make sure the entire community sees it. David felt a surge of renewed energy. This was a battle he could fight. Elena was giving him a mission, turning his frustration into focus. The idea of uncovering Karen's hidden agenda, of turning her own tactics against her, was immensely satisfying. He pulled out his laptop, a glint in his eye. Consider it done. Karen Finch is about to get a taste of her own medicine. David started his digital deep dive into Karen Finch. He began with local news archives, community council minutes, and public records, searching for any mention of her name, especially in relation to land development, environmental issues, or even property disputes. Weeks turned into days of relentless searching, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of purpose. He found her name in society columns, at charity galas, and on the board of a local historical preservation society, all the usual places for a woman of her apparent standing. Nothing concrete, nothing that explained the depth of her animosity towards Elena. Then, a casual conversation with a longtime resident at the general store provided the first real clue. Old Man Hemlock, who'd seen generations come and go, mentioned Karen. Bless her heart. She always thought that old Finch Place, down by the creek, was going to be hers. Her granddaddy owned it way back. was mighty upset when it went to auction and some fancy city folks bought it up. The Finch place. David knew that place. It was the same property Elena had outbid Karen on, the very ranch they now called home. That explained some of it, the territoriality, the sense of displacement, but it still didn't account for the venom, the relentless targeting of professional work. It felt like more than just a sour grape over a real estate deal. David broadened his search to statewide architectural and urban planning journals, articles about city park developments, and municipal project bids. He cross-referenced Karen's known associates and any businesses she was linked to. And then, he found an obscure article in a niche landscaping industry newsletter from 5 years ago. It detailed the contentious bidding process for the massive Magnolia Park redevelopment project, the crown jewel of Elena's firm's portfolio. The article mentioned several rejected bids, one of which was from a regional landscaping firm, Greenscape Solutions, which had been championed by a powerful local community advocate, identified in the article as a Mrs. K. Finch. The bid was ultimately rejected due to lack of innovative sustainable design and prohibitive long-term maintenance costs. Elena's firm, Petrova Designs, had won the contract. David's heart hammered. Mrs. K. Finch, it had to be Karen. Greenscape Solutions was owned by her brother-in-law, a fact David uncovered with a quick search of corporate filings. Karen hadn't just wanted a local company to get the contract. She had personally invested in it, perhaps even financially or through her influence. Elena's firm, with its cutting-edge, ecologically sound, and ultimately more cost-effective proposal, had not only won the bid, but, in doing so, had exposed the deficiencies of Greenscape Solutions as outdated methods. They hadn't just won a contract. They had, perhaps inadvertently, humiliated Karen and her family's business in a very public, albeit niche, forum. He found old news clippings detailing the public outcry over the traditional approach proposed by Greenscape versus the modern and sustainable vision of Petrova Designs. Karen's name appeared in the comments sections of online articles, vehemently defending Greenscape, dismissing Petrova Designs as untested newcomers whose radical ideas would ruin the park. This wasn't just about a property. It was about professional pride, family loyalty, and a public defeat, all tied to Elena's expertise. The realization hit David with a jolt. Karen hadn't just lost a bid, she had lost face. Elena, the city person she now despised, was the architect of that public professional humiliation. This wasn't prejudice based on assumptions. It was a deeply personal, hidden vendetta, disguised as community concern. The overlooked evidence wasn't a smoking gun in a legal sense, but it was a clear, undeniable motive that explained everything. Karen wasn't just a busybody. She was an embittered rival, consumed by a grudge. He printed out the articles, the bid summaries, the corporate filings. He laid them out on the dining table, next to Elena's meticulous ranch plans. This was the missing piece, he called Elena, his voice tight with discovery. Honey, I found it. I know why Karen is doing this. It's not just the ranch, it's about Magnolia Park. Elena was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. Then, a low, satisfied hum. I knew it. Bring everything. It's time. For a little community enlightenment, the monthly community association meeting was held in the old schoolhouse, a charming but slightly stuffy building that smelled faintly of lemon polish and forgotten textbooks. It was usually a mundane affair, discussions about road maintenance, stray animals, and the occasional bake sale. Tonight, however, the air crackled with an unusual tension. David and Elena were seated near the front, their stack of documents neatly organized on the table before them. Karen perched imperiously in the second row, occasionally shot them venomous glances, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break. The meeting progressed through its usual agenda until it reached new business. David caught Elena's eye. This was their moment. Mr. Chairman, if I may, Elena said, rising gracefully. Her voice, calm and clear, cut through the low hum of chatter. My husband and I would like to address a pattern of harassment we've experienced from a fellow resident, Mrs. Karen Finch, and clarify some recent misunderstandings that involve the local authorities. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Karen visibly stiffened, her eyes narrowing. Harassment? What nonsense is this? She blurted out, her composure cracking already. The chairman, a kindly old rancher named George, cleared his throat. Now, Karen, let's let Mrs. Petrova speak. Everyone gets their turn. Elena turned to face the room, her gaze sweeping over the familiar faces, some curious, some openly hostile, many simply bewildered. Last week, Mrs. Finch called the police on us, claiming we were destroying property by digging a trench for an irrigation system on our ranch. Officer Miller issued a warning notice for public safety and demanded proof of permits. She paused, letting the information sink in. We have since secured the trench to beyond county standards, and we brought all our permits and official approvals for the ranch's agricultural development to the county office. They confirmed everything is in order. A few nods from the audience, but Karen was already sputtering. It was a dangerous eyesore, and she's digging up the whole place. It doesn't look like a ranch anymore, it looks like a wasteland. Elena held up a large, professionally printed board. It was a detailed rendering of their ranch, not as it was now, but as it would be. Lush orchards, native grasslands, restored riparian zones, and winding trails. This is the wasteland Mrs. Finch refers to. These are the detailed plans for our ranch's ecological restoration and sustainable agricultural development. This is what we are building. She then showed a comparison. Aerial shots of her designs for Magnolia Park, the lush, vibrant public space, now a source of civic pride. The parallels were undeniable. The same innovative, earth-friendly approach was evident in both. Gasps rippled through the room. Many residents knew of Magnolia Park, proud of their city's green spaces, but few had connected the quiet woman on the ranch to its celebrated designer. The twist, subtly introduced by David's earlier interjection, to the officer, now landed with the full weight of revelation. This level of planning and design, Elena continued, her voice resonating with quiet authority, is what I do professionally. I am Elena Petrova, a landscape architect, and my firm Petrova Designs specializes in large-scale ecological urban planning. We designed Magnolia Park, among other projects. A stunned silence fell. Karen's face, already flushed, paled dramatically. Her eyes darted around the room, sensing the shift in public perception. Now, David interjected, stepping forward, his voice calm but firm, about Mrs. Finch's concern. We believe her complaints are not based on genuine worry for public safety or property values, but on a personal vendetta. He held up the copies of the articles and corporate filings. 5 years ago, Mrs. Finch was a vocal advocate for Greenscape Solutions, a landscaping firm owned by her brother-in-law, which bid on the Magnolia Park redevelopment project. Their bid was rejected due to its outdated design and high, long-term costs. Petrova Designs, my wife's firm, won that contract. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Mrs. Finch's family business lost a significant contract to my wife's firm. She then publicly criticized my wife's designs. It seems her current concerns about our ranch, her accusations of destruction and irresponsibility, are simply a continuation of that personal and professional animosity, thinly veiled as civic duty. The room erupted in whispers. Faces turned towards Karen, no longer with sympathy, but with suspicion. Karen sprang to her feet, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. That's a lie, a desperate attempt to deflect from their illegal activities. My family has nothing to do with this. Actually, Mrs. Finch, Elena interjected, pulling out another document. Public corporate filings clearly link you as a significant shareholder in Greenscape Solutions at the time of the Magnolia Park bid. Your family had a very direct financial stake in that project. The air went out of Karen's sails. She looked like a trapped animal, her eyes wide with a desperate plea, but there was no escape. The truth, meticulously uncovered and strategically presented, had shattered the illusion of her benevolent concern. Officer Miller, who was present at the meeting as part of his community outreach, watched from the back, his expression a mixture of surprise and dawning understanding. He had been played. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the soft rustle of papers as people passed around copies of David's evidence. Karen was exposed, not by a judge or a jury, but by the quiet power of facts and the unwavering dignity of the woman she had tried so hard to diminish. The aftermath of the community meeting was swift and decisive. The chairman, George Amedio, called for a motion to formally commend David and Elena for their transparency and their commitment to sustainable land management, a motion that passed unanimously. Several neighbors, initially skeptical or indifferent, approached them afterwards, offering apologies for misjudging them and expressing admiration for Elena's professional work. Officer Miller, looking genuinely chastened, pulled Elena aside. Mrs. Petrova, Mr. Miller, he began, a rare note of humility in his voice. I apologize for the initial misjudgment. I should have looked deeper. Mrs. Finch's complaints seemed credible at the time. Elena simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement that protocol often trumped truth until challenged. He assured them that any further complaints from Karen Finch would be thoroughly vetted before any action was taken, and hinted that her persistent, vexatious reporting might even lead to formal warnings for her. As for Karen, her carefully constructed facade crumbled. She fled the meeting, humiliated, and the community ostracized her. Her phone calls to county offices became less frequent, her complaints dismissed out of hand. The once constant small acts of harassment ceased. The silence from her property was, for David and Elena, a profound relief, a testament to the power of truth, publicly revealed. Back on their ranch, a profound sense of peace settled over David and Elena. The trench for the irrigation system was completed, and the first rows of fruit trees were planted, their young branches reaching optimistically towards the sun. The ranch was truly becoming the vibrant, ecologically thriving space they had envisioned. The conflict with Karen had been exhausting, a drain on their emotional reserves, but the resolution brought not just closure, but a deeper connection. Between them, a shared victory against injustice. You know, David said one evening, watching Elena sketch new pathways for their land, her brow furrowed in concentration. It wasn't just about the ranch, was it? Elena looked up, a soft smile on her lips. No, it wasn't. It was about assumptions. About how easily people judge what they don't understand, or what doesn't fit into their narrow definition of normal. Karen saw a city person ruining her rural landscape because that's what she wanted to see. She couldn't see the years of expertise, the passion for ecological balance, the commitment to the land. She couldn't see the woman who had transformed urban wastelands into green havens. And her own past just fueled it, David added. Her professional defeat, the family connection. It twisted her perception. Exactly. It's a reminder that prejudice often stems from a personal wound or insecurity, projected onto others, Elena mused. But it's also a reminder that standing up for what's right, for your own dignity, is essential. Not just for us, but for anyone who might be dismissed, stereotyped, or unjustly accused. Their experience with Karen Finch was a stark lesson in the insidious nature of bias and the power of a single, determined individual to weaponize it. It highlighted how easily a system designed to maintain order could be manipulated by a persistent, prejudiced voice, and how appearances could lead to immediate, unfair judgments. But it also proved that truth, when patiently and strategically unearthed, could dismantle those falsehoods. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the vast ranch sky in hues of orange and purple. David watched Elena, her face illuminated by the last light, already envisioning the next phase of their shared dream. Justice, in this instance, hadn't come from a courtroom, but from a quiet, determined resolve. From a community finally seeing beyond superficial judgments, and from the moral strength of a woman who knew her worth, both as a renowned architect and as a steward of her own land. It was a story not just about a ranch, but about the enduring fight for fairness, accountability, and the fundamental human right to be seen, truly seen, for who you are.